NASCAR could be weeks away from forcing two teams, 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports, completely out of the sport. Not because of poor performance, not because of empty sponsors, but because of one thing: a charter deal NASCAR says it has the right to take and sell. According to both teams, that decision doesn't just hurt, it doesn't just sting, it asterisk kills asterisk. In their own words, they claim that would put 23XI and Front Row out of business following the 2025 Cup Series season. Let me explain how we got here. Back in December, a federal court ordered NASCAR to temporarily treat 23XI and Front Row like they still held their racing charters. That meant they could compete, keep sponsors, and keep their drivers under contract. But NASCAR appealed, and won. That appeal threw the entire future of both teams into chaos. Why does a charter matter? Because without it, you're not guaranteed a spot in races, you're not guaranteed TV revenue, and you're not guaranteed survival. NASCAR knows this, and the teams know this too. In a court document filed just this week, the teams wrote, "This court has already found that it is not economically viable to race as open teams on a long-term basis." And NASCAR did not challenge that finding on appeal. Without that charter protection, 23XI and Front Row say their sponsors could walk, their drivers could leave, and their entire business could collapse. The filing continued. Plaintiffs will also suffer irreparable harm if they do not have charter rights for the rest of this season, because it will cause their drivers and sponsors to seek to leave. And here's where things take a darker turn. NASCAR just informed the court that it has a deal, a pending agreement, to sell those charters to new teams. Teams that didn't go to court. Teams that didn't push back. In other words, NASCAR could cash out on the charters 23XI and Front Row built their futures on. Asterisk before asterisk, the trial even starts this December. You read that right. Before a jury even hears the case, the teams are calling foul. They want an emergency injunction to stop NASCAR from selling what they say asterisk still belongs to them. Because if those charters go away, so do they. Their lawyers didn't mince words. Plaintiffs will face the imminent destruction of their businesses regardless of how the jury rules. So what's NASCAR's defense? Their legal team argues that no one can force them to do business with a group that's suing them. That it's their right to choose who gets a seat at the table. Sounds reasonable on the surface, but the teams aren't buying it. They argue the court can stop NASCAR. And more than that, the court should asterisk. They cite antitrust precedent, like the Google Play Store antitrust case, to show that companies found guilty of anti-competitive behavior can be forced to reopen deals with the parties they harmed. In their words, courts regularly order a defendant to deal with parties harmed by anti-competitive conduct following a finding of Section 2 liability. That's the key word in this whole battle: monopoly. The teams believe NASCAR is not just making business decisions. They believe NASCAR is controlling the market to benefit itself and its allies. And they say they've got the evidence to prove it. Smoking guns, internal documents, testimonies, all of it. We can't see those parts. They're redacted. But what we can see are the accusations. That NASCAR made exclusive deals with tracks they didn't even build. That they blocked rival companies like Speedway Motorsports from hosting Cup Series races. That they bought out smaller competitors like ARCA to kill competition before it could grow. The evidence thus demonstrates that rather than limiting itself to acts of competition on the merits, they wrote, NASCAR engaged in an interrelated series of exclusionary acts that had the purpose and effect of preserving its monopsony power. That's not just business, that's warfare. Legal, financial, strategic warfare. And 23XI and Front Row? They're on the front lines with everything to lose, because this isn't just a fight over paperwork. It's a fight for survival in the heart of stock car racing. Now let's get into the heart of NASCAR's defense, because they're not just sitting back. NASCAR says this whole lawsuit is built on a false premise. They argue they're not a monopoly, not even close. Why? Because, according to them, other racing options exist. They told the court that teams can always go race in other series, like the Cars Tour, a late model series owned by names like Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kevin Harvick. But 23XI and Front Row aren't buying that. Their response? dirt track and local racing might be fun, but it's not the Cup Series. They said, NASCAR cannot seriously argue that dirt track or amateur racing are substitutes for the top-tier stock car teams competing in the Cup Series. That line draws a hard line in the sand. NASCAR might let you race somewhere else, but nowhere else matters like the Cup Series. No other place has the TV time, the money, the prestige. That's why these charters are life or death. And while NASCAR tries to point out that 13 of 15 teams agreed to the latest charter deal, 23XI and Front Row argue that's irrelevant. Because if you're forced to accept unfair terms just to survive, that doesn't make it a fair deal. That makes it coercion. In their words, NASCAR still exercised monopsony power to impose terms on the teams below those that would be present in a competitive market. It gets worse. The teams claim NASCAR has no response to what they call smoking gun documents that show just how far the sanctioning body allegedly went to keep control. We don't know what's in those files. They're still redacted. But if the claims are true, we could be looking at one of the most significant antitrust rulings in modern American sports. They even accuse NASCAR of creating roadblocks for competition, like making the next-gen car only legal for Cup Series races, unlike older generations that could be run in different series. Or like using its control of ISC and ARCA to choke off smaller racing bodies. In one section, they write, internal NASCAR documents and testimony also show how NASCAR used its acquired control over ISC to deny competitors access to tracks that were needed to compete. That's a serious claim. It suggests NASCAR didn't just dominate the market, it cut the oxygen supply for anyone else trying to breathe. And the backlash doesn't stop there. They argue that exclusivity contracts NASCAR forced onto Speedway Motorsports and other independent tracks were unfair. They say, NASCAR bought track operators, ISC, Bowman Gray, and forced an exclusivity agreement on Speedway Motorsports and other independent companies that built and ran their own tracks. That's the battlefield, and we're only in the opening shots. A federal judge in Charlotte will hear both sides argue this on Thursday, but a decision may not come until weeks later. If the judge sides with NASCAR, the charters will be sold. The clock will start ticking on 23XI and Front Row's survival. If the judge blocks the transfer, NASCAR will be forced to keep two of its loudest critics in the game until the December trial. There is no clean ending here, only a storm brewing, and at the center of it, a fight not just for two race teams, but for who controls the future of American stock car racing. So, what do you think? Is NASCAR protecting the sport or protecting its power? Let us know in the comments below. This battle is just getting started.